As computer technology has grown and advanced, so has our ability to display more and more information on screen. For the 20-year-old Age of Empires 2, this increase in technology, or rather more specifically, display technology, has drastically altered the game's gameplay, and I would even go so far as to say given it new life. In essence, we can now zoom out of the game farther than we ever could, drastically changing its gameplay. However, many of you might feel like you're still stuck in the Dark Ages, with an incredibly close and obtrusive zoom level. Many of you might be wondering what you can do to fix this. Well, worry no longer, as changing your zoom level is the topic of this tutorial. This video will be divided into two sections. A simple, easy to understand tutorial first, and an interesting and in-depth explanation afterwards. And so, let's jump right in. To get started, you may have noticed that most streamers or Age 2 content creators on YouTube or Twitch use a certain uniform zoom level which can fit almost 5 castles across. No matter who you're watching, 99% of the time this is the scaling you'll see. This is because the game's zoom level is actually tied to your desktop resolution, and most people use 1920 by 1080 or 1920 pixels across and 1080 pixels up and down. I'll explain why this happens in a bit, but just trust me for a minute. What this means is that to zoom out, you need to just increase your desktop resolution. You should also check your app scaling and set that to as low as possible, because having a higher scaling will make the game zoom in. However, you'll notice that you're limited by the resolution size of your monitor. So for example, if you're using a 1600 by 900 monitor, that will theoretically be your max resolution. Fortunately for us, however, this limitation can be overcome. You can actually fool your screen to display a higher resolution by going to your custom control panel for your graphics card. Now, I have NVIDIA, so that's what I'll be using for this demonstration, but if you have a good AMD card or something else that has the correct capabilities, it should be simple to figure out. To start, open your graphics card control panel and navigate to Resolution, which is normally found under the Display tab. You'll notice that I have the default set of resolutions included, with my maximum native resolution at the top. Click Customize, and then enable resolutions not exposed by the display. Then click Create Custom Resolution and type in the resolution you want to use. Now, when you do this, you need to make sure you're running a standard aspect ratio, which is the ratio between the two numbers I keep on mentioning. So, for example, a 1920 by 1080 screen uses a 16 by 9 resolution, so with a 1920 by 1080 screen, you should keep the aspect ratio of 16 by 9 to avoid black bars. For this example, I'll use 2460 by 1440, known as 1440p. Once you enter the values, to enable your new resolution, click on Test, and then click Yes to save it. Once you click Yes, you'll notice your resolution go back down to what it was before. That's no issue, because you'll notice a new entry for resolutions under Custom. Again, this whole process of creating a custom resolution may be different for AMD, but just Google your graphics card to find out how to do it. It should not be that difficult. Now, after you do this, Windows may want to open settings to fix blurry apps. Do not do this because it will only change your resolution scaling, which will negate this whole process. Instead, if it really matters to you, open ClearType to change font if that's necessary, or just switch resolutions between playing Age of Empires or doing something else. Before I move on, know that by using this method, your graphics card is basically fooling your display to show a super high resolution. If you have a slow computer, this could possibly slow you down. Also, some graphics card and monitor combinations will only display up to a certain point. So, for example, even my GTX 1070 won't quite let me do an 8K 7680 by 4320 resolution on my 1920 by 1080 screen, no matter how much I want to be able to use that super viable and super useful resolution. Fun fact though, I tried to use the 5K resolution, but it appears that my AoE2 HD will only display textures up to the 4K resolution. So yeah, that seems pretty bad news for those of you who are planning on running the game using a movie theater screen. Anyway, to move on, many graphics cards won't even have the capability to add a resolution higher than your screen at all. For example, my Intel integrated graphics on my laptop won't let me do anything higher than 1920 by 1080, which is the screen resolution for that computer. Sadly, this leads me to believe that the people who need this fix the most won't be able to benefit from it. Most people who generally need this fix are using lower resolutions such as 1280 by 720 or 1336 by 768, and chances are these computers are laptops with AMD or Intel integrated graphics that won't allow you to artificially increase your resolution. However, if you're using a computer that will allow you to create custom increased resolutions, this fix will work for you, so it's my suggestion that you do take some time to look into it. Also, playing at a higher than average resolution can give you a significant tactical advantage in terms of map awareness, so even if you're using a 1080p monitor, you may want to try to use 1440p. This can be especially useful if you're playing on an extremely large monitor, such as a flat screen TV. Anyway, for most people watching this tutorial, the only things you need to take away from this are that A, your resolution is directly correlated with your zoom level, and B, if your computer supports it, you can create a custom resolution that is higher than your screen natively supports. However, I'm sure that many of you are interested as to why this works this way. Now, in order to explain why changing the resolution has this effect, I need to briefly explain how Age of Empires 2 works. Now, don't worry, even though this topic is a bit nerdy and a bit complicated, I'm simplifying it to make it easy to understand. To start off, you might be wondering why this zoom level is locked to your resolution, and why you can't zoom in and out like you can in modern real-time strategy games such as Halo Wars or Halo Wars 2. The simplified reason is that Age 1 and 2 are 2D sprite-based games, while most modern real-time strategy games are 3D. In the latter 3D method, the game world is constructed by taking images, called textures, and changing their perspective by linking them to a virtual surface, giving the game a sense of real depth. In 3D games, movement animation is achieved by changing the virtual position of each of these textures and the surfaces they are placed upon. In the former 2D method, however, the world is constructed by taking images called sprites and placing them on a certain position in the game world. So, for example, you'll have sprites for your units, your buildings, terrain, and your background. Movement is instead achieved by replacing each image with another one. So, for example, there are 10 separate images used per direction in the firing animation of an arbalest. Every time a unit walks or changes direction on screen, that image is actually being replaced with another one. This is important because in the Genie engine used by Age 1 and 2, each of these sprites have a certain set number of pixels in them. So for example, this sprite for an arbalest is 47 pixels tall. While this sprite needs to be displayed, it will always take up 47 pixels vertically on your screen. This is why a high-resolution screen, such as 1440p or 1080p, will look far more zoomed out than a lower-resolution screen, such as 720 or even lower. And so, the obvious answer is that to change the zoom level, you need to change your desktop resolution. What my method essentially does is fool your desktop into thinking that your monitor can display more pixels than it actually can. As a result, the game looks slightly more zoomed out. You'll also notice, however, that by doing this you lose a lot of detail. So for example, this is what it looks like to play the game at a 5K resolution. I can vaguely see my mouse on my 24-inch display, and I think my units take up all of 3 pixels. But hey, it's zoomed out, it's cool I guess. This foolery is actually kinda sorta how the zooming of Age of Empires 1 Definitive Edition works. The game takes a sprite and then changes its scaling to slightly make it appear larger or smaller. You'll notice that because each pixel isn't being displayed whenever you're on a different setting, a good amount of blur can result. However, look at this footage right here. This is actually 4K footage, but whenever I zoom in to a 1920 by 1080 resolution, it doesn't look like I've lost any detail. That's because, for recording purposes, you can actually get footage of this artificially zoomed out screen without losing any detail by using OBS or another recording software that won't downscale the resolution. The reason for this is that OBS actually records your desktop's resolution, not your screen's resolution. Having said all that, I hope that you found this tutorial useful and interesting. Changing your zoom level can have a significant impact on your game because it allows you to have far more map awareness. After playing several games at 1440p resolution, going back to 1080 feels clunky and really difficult to use. I hope that my discoveries will allow you to have the same experience. As always, thanks for watching, and thanks to my patrons, you guys are the best, and I'll see you next time.